Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Stefan, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dreamdata.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dreamdata employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations,
social selling maybe.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Hello, Irina. It has been way too long time for us almost talking to each other on LinkedIn and knowing each other, but even on WhatsApps. And finally, we're having the first conversation live with everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to
Thank
the
you. I feel like I have become friends with you over social media, and I've learned so much in just watching you go.
Look at that. We're going to talk so much about this because this is where the actual authenticity happens. So we kind of know each other, but we don't. And that's a key to success of big companies that are growing at the moment. Irina, could you give me a quick intro to yourself? And also, it can be a longer intro. How did you end up being Hootsuite's CEO? This is crazy. What's your journey been so far?
It's funny. I feel like with everybody, when you ask, how did you get to a certain role, it looks kind of easy to explain when you look backwards and you kind of explain everything in chronology order. But as you're going through the journey, it's a little bit like a jungle gym. You're just kind of going from one handle to another and you're hoping you're going in the right direction, but you don't entirely know. For background, so I'm originally a refugee from Ukraine. We came to the US and I have so much gratitude to have the opportunity to have grown up in the New York area. And I always talk about how there's two lotteries to life, the geography lottery and the parent lottery. And I lost the geography lottery, but won the parent lottery that then took me to the right geography. And so I just have a lot of gratitude around that. As far as journey, I think it's similar to you in some ways. And to many that probably are tuning in or not, but it's you kind of just figure out one step at a time. And there's a lot of grit and resilience. And one of the things that I've learned about myself over the last few years is I didn't think that what I had in grit was that special, especially because when you come from an immigrant home, there's no plan B. So you're kind of just counting on yourself to make things happen. And somebody said, wow, grit is a superpower of yours. And I'm like, what do you mean? Doesn't everybody just have this? Like you just go figure it out. And I think it's really similar. I think the things I had to figure out changed over the course of my career. I originally started in finance, which was incredible for me because I just learned the decision-making superpower of kind of 80-20. How do you make decisions with 80% of the information that are going to drive 20% of the 20% of the info to drive 80% of the outcome? And I think that has allowed me to move fast, but I didn't want to stay in investment banking or private equity, and I wasn't the best at it. And moving on the operation side has always been a passion of mine. I love teams. I love building. I love being part of something that gets to create something similar to your founder mentality. While I'm not a founder, I feel really grateful that I found Hootsuite. And I think Hootsuite sits right now in this really special intersection of what's happening in the world with really technology and generational shifts and revenue shifts. And so we'll talk more about this, but the new generation is going on social to make decisions. And at Hootsuite, we're here to really enable our enterprise customers and whoever else wants to use the product to basically figure out, how do you get more exposure for your brand? How do you acquire more customers? How do you expand? How do you retain? All through leveraging social and social intelligence.
Fantastic. And that reminded me this story of your grit. I read a post yesterday, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the person who posted it, but I'll find it. Where they say, when going through your career or anything in life, you already have a no. So your only option is to go for a yes. Because otherwise, the default is if you ask for it or not, you already have a no.
I love that. You don't have it already.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't you go for anything else than a no?
I love that because, it's funny too. And given kind of the job that you're in and what you've built, like clearly you have this as well. But hearing no doesn't bother me. Like I don't find it offensive. I don't even find it disappointing, to be honest. all I think is when someone tells me no, all I think is, okay, I'm asking the wrong person or I'm asking the wrong question. But like, there's a yes, you're just not going to be the one to give it to me. And that's okay. And so there's not, and I think a lot of salespeople feel like this when you kind of look at salespeople, a good win rate on a salesperson for a new account is 30%, right? That's like some of the best. So they're getting told no 70% of the time. Right, and that's that's a crazy statistic when you think about it, or even elections or tennis players or baseball players, like, no one's winning 100% of anything, and so when kind of put it in, and I like the way you phrase it too, you already have a no, so it's just
It's
probably
not mine. I'll put it out in the show
yeah,
notes.
who's
It's
ever
not mine
who's ever
because you said it. But I think it's so inspiring. And the whole story of you coming over to the right location to have the right career with the right family. I mean, most of the things you don't choose, but then there are so many options that you are actually choosing to get
yeah.
that type of a
Or
yes.
at least, like, taking advantage of it, like, I think one of the things oops, sorry, my lighting. I do think one of the things that is interesting is you might not be in the right position, but how do you at least take advantage of the spot you're in?
Exactly. Fantastic. Today's topic is, though, not about career growth, which we could continue talking about, is about authenticity in that type of social buyer first world. And especially in B2Bs, we constantly hear, oh, B2Bs are boring and the buyers are shifting and they come with a negative approach. Like they come with distrust to you already when they come into a sales call. So let's shift that up and figure out how can salespeople and teams in general, brands can build up that type of a trust
Mhm.
that when somebody comes into a sales call, they are already kind of aware of what you do and they just are going to build more of that type of a social understanding and yeah, ticking the boxes. Can you actually do it? So let's talk a little bit about personal authenticity. And you spoke about that a lot in general from going through your career too. And now of what you've built out is even bigger on your personal growth as well at Hootsuite. Well, whoever knows who she is, everybody knows Irina. So that's kind of that how crazy. You either know an owl or you know Irina, and then it's fantastic. So how do you see authenticity in general for companies' growth?
I would just put it back to relationships. I don't know if you read this Harvard study. It's the longest longevity study that they've ever done. They followed a huge amount of people over the course of 70 or 75 years. And over the course of life, at the end of life, they basically asked, what are the most important things in your life? And where do you have regrets? And the most important, the regrets, everything came down to relationships. So your happiness was based on the number of relationships and the deepness of those relationships, right? The authenticity. Your frustration was the lack of building relationships. Your regrets were didn't build enough relationships. And so we are a human society for now, for as long as we get to stay human. And a lot of it goes back to relationships. And so authenticity, the best way to build a relationship is two things. It's immediately showing vulnerability to someone, and two is kind of showing empathy and compassion, right? And so the vulnerability piece goes back to authenticity. If everything, when you talk to somebody at a dinner party or wherever you are, and all you hear is, well, this works, I'm great, I have no problems, my stuff is easy, immediately you're kind of like, this person isn't for me. Versus those that show up and be like, can I tell you about the day I had? There's nothing that worked. I think it might be me. And you're immediately kind of bonded, trauma bonded, but bonded to them to say, oh, I appreciate this. This is how I'm feeling. And so I find that on social media it's kind of the same thing. And whether it's an influencer or an executive that's out there, the more authentic people are to the day to day, the more the relationship you're able to build. I mean, I feel like I've been on a journey with you on your entrepreneurship and how you've been scaling this business because you just put so much out there, even though I don't think we've met in person yet.
Oh, that's a big point. And how do you move that from that personal way of talking and being authentic to a business world as well? Because it's easy for us to be authentic when we know and are aware, it's like don't be too positive. And also for Americans, that's one of the shifts that I've noticed coming from Europe. Usually everything is fine and everything is growing and we're fantastic. And how are you doing? I'm good. It's like, no, wait, where is the person behind it? Because I know you're struggling. It's like,
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Eastern Europeans, they don't really smile a ton or tell you things are great. And so I appreciate that. It's similar on the B2B side. I think there's two things that are interesting. One is we did this research on what customers and consumers want to see from B2B and B2C. And the number one thing that came back on brand messaging, brand outreach, and what they're doing on social is that more than 60+% of the time, brands and companies are talking about themselves instead of the benefit for the customer. So they're talking about, here's the great product launch we did, here's an award we won, here's this thing that we're doing. And if you're the reader of that, great, but I don't know how many times you wake up in the morning really hoping that some company is going to do a product launch, right? And so what you want to know is, here's the things that are making my life really difficult. How are you here to help? And so the customers that identify with the brand and the business value prop the most are those that have the brand talk about what's in it for the person reading it, for the person consuming it. And so I think that switch of not talking about I as a brand and more about, here's what we hear from you, or here's what we can teach you or help you, or here's kind of some of the best practices, has resonated really well. And then the second thing that I would say is, a lot of the times, and this is a trickier one, especially with the rise of Gen Z, is your brand is being talked about and decided on in places that you don't really control the narrative. And so, especially with Gen Z, they're not going to Google to make decisions, they're going to social. And we've talked about this, but the day one list for a lot of B2B buyers, meaning the list that they decide of what vendors to go to, is actually established before they get on the phone with a single sales rep. And so, your company's ability to get on that list is, how do you show up in all of these different areas where that prospective customer is making their research decisions? Because the research phase has materially changed, that you are no longer directly influencing it. You just have to show up in your content, in your papers, in how the knowledge that you're giving, is it showing up where they are on their journey?
And if you flip it to marketing, now we're talking a bit about Gen Zs and how they're doing their decisions. And there's still a lot of Gen Xs and millennials and like all of the rest of the people here. But how are they shifting those decisions of purchasing B2B solutions? And what can marketing do in order to be those places as well? If they're not going to Google, what should we do and focus on to be where
Right.
everybody's looking
Well,
for
fun
information?
fact, about 71% of B2B buyers are now either Gen Z or millennials. And I think a lot of the sales tactics that the B2B buyers are using are actually much more old school. Email
Yep.
marketing, cold calling. I don't know about you, but I've not answered a cold call in ever. And it's gotten to the point where Gen Z, and that I talk about how they're this generation of contradictions. They grew up with, a phone in their hand, but they don't actually use it to talk. And so, if you're going to continue doing the same sales tactics to this majority new buying demographic, it's not going to really land. And the things that do is, again, going back to the authenticity, but social media is now the new CRM, right? 75% of people who follow a brand say they're more likely to purchase from it. About 60% already have. And I think a lot of customers, or even first time customers that I'm meeting with, and CMOs or CEOs, they're saying, okay, that's great. And that makes sense for B2C, but I have a B2B brand that doesn't apply to me. And, my retort is, do you sell to humans? And if you do, which, is not maybe a forever plan given the world of AI, but while you're still selling to humans, there's 5.5 billion people every day spending 3+ hours on social. Your customers are on social. They might be lurkers, right? They might be the people that look and don't post, but they are 100% on social.
Interesting. So we have to be on social. We have to be relatable as a
Mm.
brand for their people. And when we already have the buyer in the room, one on one or one to many, when we are actually talking about their problems, you're mentioning that the tactics have changed, but the sales are still selling in the old
Mhm.
fashioned way. What do sales need to do when they meet the buyer one on one in order not to be that type of old school
Yeah.
banter?
Well, I think there's, especially now, and we see this, some of our insurance companies that leverage our listening tools to build relationships are doing it smartly. They can go and understand, I can learn so much about you, Laura, by just looking at what you post, your pictures, like, were you in the middle of Times Square? Like, all these things that you can learn about you just by watching and listening. And so it's on to the sale, whether your company has social intelligence tools, and great. If you're big enough to be able to kind of bring in those tools into your sales organization, wonderful. If not, go on social media and do the dirty work. But you can actually learn what the person cares about. Do they like hiking? Do they like this? And then the other thing that's really interesting, and we did it between the two of us without fully realizing it, is there is this principle that the more you see a name, the more likely
Mhm.
you are to recognize it. The more you see a face, the more likely you are to recognize it. And so ad companies have been using this on us for decades, right? If you see an ad 7 to 12 times, the likelihood that you're going to see it in a store or take an action on it is much higher. And same thing on social.
Yeah.
We're commenting on each other's posts. The first comment is like, okay, that's kind of cute. The second comment, I'm like, oh, who's this person? The third comment. And then at this point, you're like, great, of course I'm going to comment on you. I'm following you. I'm engaged with you. And so if you show up on my screen, I'm like, I know you. We've been talking, even though it's not kind of the in real life relationship.
Nice. One of the things and tactics that we speak with our salespeople as well is that when your buyers, especially if they're not that active on LinkedIn, when they do post and you're selling to that person, even if you are that number 5 like who appears on their post, you don't have to be too cringy and like write agree or give very deep comments on something that they're just resharing, but they will start seeing you because you're seeing them and it's kind of an approval. Okay, I'm seeing you, I'm following because I want to be relatable while I am selling to you. So that builds up the relationship while we're not talking. This is a totally different level of
Mhm.
selling.
Like it's mime selling. And it's funny, it's relationship building to what you said, because you're right. You don't always have to have some like insightful comment that like you used 10 minutes on Chat GPT to craft. Sometimes it's enough to be like, this is great, thumbs up.
Yeah, yeah. You talk about the
Mm.
pull model. Tell me a little bit more about what that is and how
Yeah.
everything is shaped.
I kind of related to dating a little bit. I'm gonna see if I can do this in a non-controversial way. But I think one of the things that made Bumble such a success is they went and said, okay, the normal dating environment is I'm gonna really aggressively push, right? So guys are gonna say, do you want to go on a date? They text you, they call you. There's this, you know, proactive kind of coming to you. And Bumble said, well,
Mhm.
hold on. Maybe women want to be in control of the dating. Maybe they want to be the ones that are pulling what they want to them instead of kind of pushing away and deciding what's left. And I think in many ways, Gen Z is really similar to that, in that the way to get them not to buy something is to attack them with ads and telling them what to buy, and really constantly in their ear, like texting them, emailing them, calling them, telling them this is what you need to buy. What they want to do is be in charge of their own research to make their own decision. And so the best way to sell to them is have them pull you in, which is essentially showing up where they're doing their research. Right. So, depending on what it is that the product is that you're selling, we know that even though it's a generation that's considered kind of a TikTok generation where it's like 6 seconds or less, they're on average consuming 13 pieces of long form content. They're going to go and listen to the YouTube video. They're going to go and read the reviews. They're going to go and understand what's happening. And so, how do you show up in those ways that's almost like trying but not trying, so that when they feel like this is their decision to make, they either understand your executive and the voice and they identify with the values, or they've read customer reviews, or they really got a chance to play with the product themselves, or they've literally gone and seen, oh, their buddy at this person is using them and was featured in a case study. I'm making this up, but it's one of those ways that allows them to do the research themselves, and then they get to opt in the decision.
Yeah, nice. And it creates that balance of credibility as well. Because if you're just building authenticity and you do all the video walk and talking and stuff that we know very well about, you also have to have created a lot of content that is credibility building, that shows that you've got a product, that people love it, that there are reviews and people are actually using it, so that when they come into a meeting with sales, then they do trust
Yeah, and
that
the
there
questions they're
is
asking from sales, like we're seeing, I'm going to get this stat a little wrong, but generally, it's almost like they don't. Gen Z doesn't get. By the time Gen Z gets on the phone with a customer, with a sales rep, they are buying that product or service 80+% of the time. And it's not because your sales reps are
Mhm.
that good at converting. It's because they already have done all the research that you're on their day one list. They've already narrowed it down, and they're essentially showing up with just confirmation questions.
So that means that, and correct me if I'm wrong, so if they're buying 80% of the time, that means that they're buying one of the products they're looking into, or 20% doing nothing.
And then that 80% then would be converted into which of the products that they have been testing, or speaking with sales reps, they're going to
Yeah,
buy. Is that
and they
correct?
might 20% of the time go to another vendor, so it does happen. It might not be just nothing, but a lot of the time is if they are taking for them the headache of getting on the phone with someone, which is something that is not their normal apparatus, then they've already done a lot of work to feel good that there is a high likelihood they want to move forward with you.
Interesting. Yeah. So, talk to me a little bit about social listening. We don't do that enough, at least at Dream Data. And explain to me, how do companies use it in the growth situations for whichever company? And feel free to come with examples. What type of companies are usually best, who's falling out, and so on, so people can learn what they can do with
Yeah.
social listening.
It's a really powerful tool. I think that the thing that really jumps out at me, it's the ability to listen to what your customers want. And I don't know how in this day and age you wouldn't be doing that. I think in old school you would read customer focus groups, you would read customer support tickets, and here the customers are literally talking about what they want on these different social channels. Why wouldn't you listen to it? And so, for example, there was this big CPG company I was actually meeting with. They make candy and beverages that you've heard of. And one of the things that they were thinking of is entering the Italian market with, and I'm going to get this a little wrong, but they were thinking of entering the Italian market with some iced cappuccino bottle. And they proactively tested it from a listening perspective, and they heard back terrible. Like, who does this? What? Nobody wants this. And all this negative sentiment around this kind of ad that they launched, the content that they put out there. And they decided not to go into the Italian market with us and instead pivoted to a different type of drink that when they tested it, the positive sentiment was really high and it ended up being a wild success to them. Right. And before that, they would have spent so much time and money doing this and maybe getting right on the customer focus groups that take months and months and weeks to get. Here you can get it in a minute. Or even Starbucks, one of the things that, they're famous for in the fall is their pumpkin spice latte. And one of the things that they saw for a few years in a row is the talk about pumpkin spice latte started to come down. But there was a lot of conversation about apples and kind of that becoming something interesting. And so was it last year, the year before, they launched their apple cider foam oat milk latte, whatever it was, and it was a hit. It was one of the biggest launches that they had. And so again, it's just using the intelligence they have. And some of our B2B customers, one of the things that they use it is understanding, like, one of our two healthcare systems merged. And there was a lot of negative sentiment around the merger. They then turned around and used their own employees as employee advocates to get on social and talk about what this means for their career, the benefit for the nurses, what this can do for them. And all of a sudden you can literally live see how the sentiment is improving. Or I was just on with another customer today that uses it for market intelligence to see when they launch a product, what do people talk about from their launch versus a competitor's launch, right? So there's market awareness, market insights, competitive intelligence, and you can get really tuned in to the area you want to focus on, the type of conversation you want to hear, and you just can take a lot of go-to-market decisions based on that. You can also test content.
Is that usually past something is launched? Like for B2C is a
Sometimes.
product, for B2B, or is it before doing the intelligence before we launch it? Should we adjust it? And how would
Yeah, I
that be
think it's
done?
both. So you could do it by just testing content, and we can forecast what we think is going to be the sentiment around it because of our language models and our LLMs are built on several years of data. We have pretty good forecasting capability of what will happen and what will people say. And so you could pre-launch it. You can do a quick test and hear what people are saying. You can also just use it for insights and get conversation clusters of what are people talking about in different areas and get pretty tactical on what it is that you should be talking about or what topics are trending. Or if you want to see, hey, I want to understand if there's like influencers gaining traction, if anybody gets among above certain followers, give me an alert. And so some people use it as a Google alert but for social media, and so
Mhm.
there's a lot of
So
different
smart.
use cases for it.
And now AI has entered the room before we get taken over
Mhm.
as people. So, where do you see AI playing in really well into the authenticity of every single brand? And where is it really going too much and we need to keep people in check?
I think there's always a little part of me that's thinking the world's going to end with AI, but the majority of me thinks it's awesome. And I mean, for my own kind of productivity in life, it's just helped so much.
Yeah.
From a social media perspective, like the two ways that our customers really have been leveraging it for success is, you're a content creator. The blank sheet is a really scary start to anything, right? It's what am I going to talk about? How am I going to create this? What are we going to put on there? And so, leveraging our LLM models, we have this social GPT that basically will take social listening and say, okay, well, Laura, this is where your audience is talking about the most in your comment section. Here's the topics that are trending.
Nice.
Here's like 5 topics that seem interesting. We're going to take a cut at writing a few posts, and then you can go and edit. It's like everything else that it's your name. You're not gonna just say, "Go hit send" on something that you didn't review when it's your brand and your trust associated with it, but what a great place to start so you can be an editor. And so really
Yeah.
leveraging it to be not just like a blank sheet of paper from the creator side. And that goes from everyone from salespeople and writing the right messages, leveraging again what their customers are saying, to the marketing departments, etc. On the second side, that's really interesting is we have all of this incredible data, billions and billions of
Yeah.
data. And before AI, it would have been impossible to turn that data into actionable insight because it's just too overwhelming. And now, one of the things that our customers are having a lot of success in is you will go into our Chat GPT Studio, Social GPT, we call it Yeti, and you literally say, "Hey, let's pretend I'm Laura. How does my social campaign compare to so and so competitor? Or what's working the best within my social post? Or I'm really targeting this demographic. What are some topics that they want to hear? Or where are they going to spend most of their time on social?" And so it essentially goes and does all of this insight and just gives you the punchline that you can then take action on.
Fantastic. Yeah, because then you're much more relatable. It's so much faster for you to be creative on top of something that people actually can relate. You
And
don't
you
have to
can add your
just lie.
personal flair to it and your relationship aspect to it, right? And I think part of the part that you have to do a little work on is, and you can still ask, okay, well, if this is my target customer base, what's the right strategy for my social presence? And it can spit it out. You still have to edit it and make it your own, but it's such a
Yeah.
great partner and advisor to get you going.
Nice. You've got a very nice compliment from Marcin saying that you've got a lot of interesting insights about Gen Z
Yes.
purchasing habits. I would like to shift into a little bit about that, but from Hootsuite's perspective. How did you shift right now into those types of habits being changed? You've got employee advocacy, you've got all of the people all over with their owls and so on. So, how do you perceive it, and what is the strategy
I
behind
think like most, we're still going through our own journey. I think one of the things that got me interested in this, I saw the statistic that about 70% of buyers are Gen Z or millennials. And in my naiveness, I thought, okay, well, I'm a millennial. How different could me and Gen Z really be? And so I went and started interviewing all these Gen Zers. And it's very difficult to find a bunch of 20-year-olds that will talk to you, but I found them in very non creepy ways. And I, would ask them all these different questions. And it really became clear to me that we are not the same. And I think one of the things that was also really clear is there's this generation of contradiction. And I mentioned one that they grew up with this phone in their pocket, but they don't use it to talk. They want in office, but not all the time because they want also remote from work. They want to be able to travel, but they want to do it on a budget. They want to be able to have a good wellness life, but they also want to make sure that they have alone time for their mental health. So it is this back and forth contradiction, a little bit of a generation. And it also goes back to their purchasing behavior. And we talked about this is they want to research on their own. They grew up in this 3-click Amazon generation where if they have to do anything more than 1 or 2, maybe 3 clicks, they're wondering why, what am I doing here? Right. And they've also grown up in this place of Netflix where they don't have to talk to somebody on a movie recommendation. It tells them you like so and so, here's the next 5 shows you should watch. And so for them, kind of interacting with Chat GPT is awesome, and interacting with any social GPT that we have or whatever it is, because their avoidance of kind of getting on the phone to talk to a person is pretty high. What that means for companies, similar to us, we're on a journey. I think how do you make your product as demoable as possible? And we're not fully there yet because, again, some of it comes with a more complexity. So you have to get on the phone with some people. And so we're working through how do we make that less complex and more interactable. I think the second thing that we are doing really well is being really thoughtful of the top of the funnel. And specifically, what that means with AI coming in, most companies are feeling a really big shift in their top of funnel, their SEO market share and kind of the leads that were coming from their SEO optimization. And we're seeing a lot of that really lean into LLMs. And so where we've been spending more time is where LLMs build a lot of their credibility, which is back to social. And so making sure that you're really maximizing the content, the volume, the uniqueness of the words that you're putting out there so that you can get picked up by the LLMs. Because again, they're doing their research, not by getting on the phone with you. And then lastly, employee advocacy you touched on. This is a generation that really wants to have a relationship or at least understand what the executives of these companies stand for. So they won't purchase if your executive does not have a social presence. They will literally make decisions off of that. And you can look at that and say, oh, that's ridiculous, but it's facts. So you can either decide that you're going to participate or not.
This is so interesting. Yeah, because you're talking about the generation who does not want to talk to strangers on the phone and want to do their own research. But then again, they do expect those strangers to talk at them on their screen and tell them their perspective of, I don't know, life values in general. So this is a very big gap for us millennials to figure it out. I
And we
love
see
this.
it. Yeah.
So
Sorry. Go ahead, Laura.
no, go
No,
ahead,
please.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Fred.
Okay, I'll go
But
ahead. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I see it in my own social content is, when I started, it was a little scary and uncomfortable. And I thought, okay, well, I have a company to run. What am I doing? Is this really the best use of my time? And when, meeting with thousands of our customers, it's hard to not do what we preach. So I kind of started putting myself a little bit out there. And the results, probably 6 to 9 months in, started really coming in pretty clearly. Where if you look at our enterprise gong calls, the amount of times that my LinkedIn presence was mentioned in the last 3 months alone, almost 40% of our monthly leads were influenced in some way by my social presence, whether that was somebody saying, I follow Irina, or I like this, or I like that content. And once we kind of started getting that data, we started thinking, oh, wow, this, this really is powerful.
it is. And I do relate to that as well because it's very scary. I now recently, when I moved to New York more than half a year ago, there's so much work, there's school, there's everything, and then you kind of thrift away from all that type of authenticity and walking and talking videos and so on. Because first, I'm not sure if it's relatable. Number two, I don't always look really good on the street.
Walking
I was
while
like, I don't
talking
really
with
want to do it.
steps, and it's a lot. There's just a lot going on.
Exactly. And you would think, who wants to listen? Because everybody who's buying, they're not watching. And I might ruin something in some sale. But you would be surprised how much of a difference it actually makes. And we all have to get into this and get into the routine of being vulnerable. If it's not a video, do it in text. Elena from Chili Piper, she's really good on
Yes.
text. She's writing a lot of text and not that
And
much
by the
in
way, if
video.
I was as
You-
good of a writer as she is, I'd be writing also. I'm not.
Exactly, exactly. And that's a scary step, but I think it's very, very necessary. How do you enable your employees to do something similar like you do or in their own voice as
You
well?
want to know something really funny? So I do this weekly all hands with all 1,500 across our company. It's 15 minutes. It's very TikTok kind of style. And we try to just communicate as much as possible because there's so much happening. We're in a remote global company. You want people to feel, the part of the nest and we're connected. And we do this every week. And sometimes when I get a certain idea, I'll do a post and I don't mention it in the Who Check. Sometimes I mention it in our weekly meeting or not. But no matter what, when I put it on social and I run into somebody, they're like, oh, I read this. I'll get slacks about my LinkedIn. I'm like, what about this weekly call that I do every week that I've literally been saying the same thing? But on social, they're like, yeah, I relate to that. I feel seen by that. And so, in a weird way, it's not only helped us from a customer and a go to market perspective, but I feel like it's brought our owls kind of into the mix. And in some ways, they feel like they understand me more. I understand them because I'll type something and they'll come back and be like, oh my God, well, I read this book that was really interesting. Or they would just feel comfortable sharing their perspective on it.
Nice. And how does that reflect to customers as well? Because they see you, but sometimes they see your people as well. So what is the added
Oh,
value
it's
there?
huge. And I think there's this misperception that you need to have a lot of followers to get a lot of reach. And there's been a lot of
Uh-huh.
studies that have shown you don't need, like, somebody with 200 followers can get the same reach as me, you, whoever else. With a lot more, it really depends on, are you hitting kind of the right content piece, and the algorithms change daily. And so one of the things that it does is a real equalizer. And for our customers, one of the things I hear all the time is, oh, we see your owls posting. It encourages us to drive our employee advocacy programs. Or if they see me, they'll send it to their CEO and say, hey, look, you're not going to be the only CEO that's doing this. Here's like a few good examples. And so I think it's similar to all of us. When we see somebody doing something, it's a lot easier for us to pick up the habit. But I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm curious. You come from Denmark, I think, right?
Yeah. I come originally from Lithuania, but I've been living here for 16
And so
years.
that culture is very, I feel like, not social driven.
Yeah.
How did you get comfortable with it?
Um, Actually, pushing through to do it made people also see that this is a possibility for all of us to do. So kind of everybody wants to do it, but are a little bit afraid. But if you're doing it, we're
It's
going to do
addicting.
more
Yeah,
of
you
it.
want to copy what others are doing around you.
Exactly. And that type of energy and wanting to share openly also spreads back into all of your sales conversations. And my next question to you was also, how does that affect enterprise sales? Because you might think, oh, this is a B2C thing, it's everything is fast, you click, 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 you bought it, or tiny B2B purchases. But you're selling to huge enterprises. What does that mean for
I mean,
the enterprise
we're
sales?
selling, I think we have more than 60% of the Fortune 1000. And so we're selling to a lot of enterprises that, bigger ticket deals. And it's the same thing because the magic is the people behind the enterprise deals are the same humans that are on social media, that are me and you, that are looking and saying, oh, wait, I've seen this CEO. I relate to them. I understand I've seen all these owls. I've seen these people talk about these case studies. I'll give you one example is we had a sales rep post about one of the case studies we did for the MBA. And it was, specific about what they were doing from a social listening and outreach perspective. And a different firm saw that and said, we have the same problem. They proactively reached out to that sales rep to say, hey, can you just walk me through this? 30 days later, we closed the deal and it was over 100K ACV. And so if you look at attribution, I don't know how you would really attribute that because they didn't like the post. They didn't comment on the post. They viewed it and then immediately went and said, hold on, you just found me at exactly the right time that I had the same problem. And so there's this magic that comes with social media. And I come from a finance background, so I get it. And I talk to a lot of CMOs and CEOs that are saying, well, my CFO wants to know the ROI of social. And
Mhm.
it's an impossible thing because I would ask you, what's the ROI of relationships? Why do we bother going to conferences? Why do we bother having relationships? Why don't we just all hang out in our digital worlds? Why do we do anything in real life? And so it's an impossible thing to put a number to. However, as it starts and as you go, you definitely can start quantifying it because it's real.
Yep, absolutely. And it shows in your revenue at the end of the day. Also, we've got a comment from Laura saying that when I post, people don't like, they don't comment, but they
Yeah,
tell me that they saw it. This
all the
happens
time.
all the time as soon as you
All the
started.
time.
People are hiding behind their screens and not always are comfortable to even comment, or they don't have the time. And then later they would relate back to your video,
Well,
whatever they
there's some
saw about
crazy
that.
stat, and I'm going to be closer than that, but it's something like only 3 to 5% of all the people on social media actually create the content, and it's responsible for like 97% of all content or something ridiculous. And so you're right, some people won't even like, but they're scrolling, they're looking.
Exactly. So for the overwhelmed marketers and go-to-market specialists who are planning, what are we going to do? What are we going to write? What kind of new launches we're going to do? What are your main tips for them to like, let's distill this. This is important. This is less important. What should I focus on?
Three things. And it's not to say brand is back, but I think given everything that's happening with SEO and the shifts in AI on the funnel side, I think ignoring top of funnel and middle funnel is a mistake. And social is such a great way to get into the LLM feed and to start getting into tops of minds for buyers. So when they're ready to buy, they've already seen your brand or your advocates and interacted 7 to 12 times. And so I think that's one. Two, I think a secret hidden power that when we have customers that do it really well, and we have this one insurance company that kills it. They have 100 plus thousand employees. They enabled 11,000 of their sales force to be on social media. And they track kind of what works, what content resonates, what converts. And they went from having each one of those reps do 3 deals on social to last year, they're up to 11 per rep. And so that's just a crazy stat when you think about it. And so sometimes we think of our superpower as the sales rep, but like you have your entire employee base. The healthcare companies that merged enabled all, not 100,000, but nearly most of their 100,000 employees to get out there and spread the word. We just worked with this other company, Gymshark, and they enabled every single one of their managers to go talk about their individual gym locations. We're working with a top audit firm that's enabling their employees to talk about what they're doing with AI and consulting services and how they're thinking about it. And so you have this magic of your employee base, and it can't be fake. You can't tell them what to post. You can give them ideas on what's happening, and then they can make it their own. But people want to hear from people, they want to buy from people. So I think employee advocacy is another thing that's really interesting. And then third, it's crazy to me that most companies are not using social intelligence to make decisions, whether it's your product roadmap, whether it's how your sales cycle works, whether it's your sales enablement, whether it's your communication strategy, your customer strategy, your marketing strategy. There's all this knowledge out there from all these people spending all this time on social media. Don't you want to hear their point of view, your market competitive point of view, what's happening, and listening to the conversations and the topics that are trending? And so why not take all of this work from an intelligence perspective and put it to work for you?
This is fantastic because you're talking about the big numbers from the big corporations, how they turn this around, which sounds amazing and very impactful. But the cool part of it is for the smaller ones, it's the cheap lift effort. You don't have to pay for it. It's your work,
Mhm.
yes. It's not paid
Mhm.
marketing.
And that's the critical part. And you know, one of the things that's so interesting, I talk about the stat all the time, but let's say a friend gave you a recommendation. What's the likelihood that you would go act on that recommendation? Like a referral, like a restaurant. I use the software, it's really good, a book. Like what percent do you think you would go do it?
If you are in the market for a restaurant right now or a specific software, it's like
Okay. And what if
95%,
you
if
got an
not more.
ad? What percent do you think you would hit on that ad?
Oh no, no way, no way.
So the
It's, I
answer
don't
is
know,
about 3
3.
to 5% on the ad, and on a
Yeah.
referral, generally, it's about 70%. So if someone you trust
Okay.
gives you a referral, you are 70% likely to go act on that referral. And yet, most budgets in marketing are set up the opposite, right? Most of it
Mhm.
is towards ads and very little towards that referral, organic type of effort, and that is where I think social can just be a major unlock and really a democratization tool. Take a stab at
Fantastic.
that for everyone.
Unfortunately, it is a difficult one to prove. You touched upon the CFOs. Oh, what's the
Mhm,
ROI of this? If I'm a marketer who's pushed for it, you would just push how much did we pay for Google? How much did we pay for events? This is how many deals we have closed. Everything else in social listening, all your social activities at the company are very difficult to measure and to tell your
mhm,
executives that it actually works because they live in
mhm.
spreadsheets. Any suggestions
I think the
there?
social listening actually is the easiest part because when you see what the customers are saying, it's insight that you immediately think, "Oh, wow, this resonates." And so I think social listening really is not a difficult one to explain. I think the tougher one is the organic kind of why should you post? Why should you publish? Why should you drive more content on social? Because that one is tough to connect. How do you connect a post to revenue? And some of the
Mhm.
stuff that we work through is the reason you do ad spend is you believe that if you do an ad, you're going to get some sort of impressions. Based on the impressions, you think you're going to get clicks. Based on the clicks, you think you're going to get some sort of pipe that's going to convert at some percent times some dollar value gets you your revenue. If you go all the way down the pipe. And I think it's the same thing on organic. So we know for us that, certain of our posts that take off and hit virality, we get millions of people to see, and those millions, then you do the math and you realize just off one post, it can be up to $1 million of revenue. It might take 6 to 8 months to kind of pull through. On others, it's not as exciting and it's only 50,000 in revenue of whatever it is. But most companies actually have their funnel math, or you should never be advertising because if you don't understand what an advertising dollar will get you in revenue, why would you bother advertising? And so if you're a company that understands that funnel math, you should be able to imply your organic reach and impressions and just do similar math. You might discount it, you might not. You can take a view on do you think organic is better than ads or not? But either way, you should get a pretty good range on the implication for you.
Very interesting. And are you doing it only on LinkedIn or any other platform for social as well?
I can barely I handle one. So I am doing the best I can on one. I don't have capacity for more. Also, for me, LinkedIn is kind of the safe play. And for
Mhm.
my goals is different. Like I don't really want to be showing that that much more. But it depends. For different brands, your customers might be on in different places. And so you do have to be more targeted. I think for most CEOs, depending on what, so we have a lot of healthcare CEOs that post on Facebook. We have some healthcare, some CPGs
Cool.
that go on TikTok. So I think it depends where your customer base is. I spent a lot of
Yeah.
time talking to CEOs and CMOs, and so most of them are on LinkedIn. So that works, but it depends. I'm good with
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
That helps with hiring people as well from the executive perspective as well. So it's not just selling, but also getting the right people into the team. What I like LinkedIn about as well is that you are able to sponsor the posts of your executives too. And even though it feels like an ad, you're still seeing the person speaking, which means that it's still personal, even though it's targeted to you because you are their target market. So if you haven't seen it, here you go. We're going to put some dollars
And
behind
I
it.
actually think it's smart. Like one of the things that some of our really like high functioning organic and ad teams do for our customers is they'll see an ad on the organic side that goes viral and they'll kick it over to the ad side to say, hey, let's boost it.
Mm.
Or they'll go the reverse and say, hey, this ad content or this really worked. Let's kick it over to the organic side. And so I think those organizations that have the ability to see and work together really matters. And the same thing on listening. So when they're hearing something that's really insightful, they immediately go and take action, whether it's on ads or on the organic side.
Love it. It's very smart because then it doesn't feel like it's a created ad
Yeah.
for a
And you're being
specific
smarter
target.
with your dollars that you're putting to work.
I love it. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Irina, for today. If there are any questions, we're happy to take one or two today. There seem to be just a lot of positivity in the comment sections. I'm loving to hear it, both from Kaylin, from Laura, from everybody who has been commented today. Thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to Irina on LinkedIn because that's the platform
Yeah.
of usage. Don't cold call and watch all of the videos. Is there anything else that you would like to give a final word for before we
No,
finish
I
up?
think the one thing I would say is a lot of people kind of talk about how they want to get their CEO on or they want to get more of their execs on. And so, what are some tips? And I think one tip is I would say two tips. One is ask them to follow people that they find interesting, just following starts. And then the second thing is have them just post a comment here and there. And once you get comfortable posting comments, there's just magic that happens where you end up starting to feel more comfortable with a post.
Nice. Even the busy
You can find
CEOs
10 minutes
can
a
do
day.
it.
It's literally 10 minutes a day.
Exactly.
I spend more because I get addicted, but you can get it done with 5 to 10 minutes a day.
Fantastic. Very useful for your company, your new
And it's
hires.
listening to your customers. I mean, what CEO does not have 5 to 10 minutes to listen to their customers?
Exactly. Thank you so much
So,
for today, Irina. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It was a very good
yes, thank
session.
you.
See
Such
you
a
next
pleasure.
time.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.